I don't know, JB. I'm thinking Westminster maybe in the pack again. What are you
Yeah,
thinking?
yeah, probably. I think so.
These guys are looking pretty interesting with their assessments are. And
Uh,
oh, oh, oh!
Whoa, blast from the
That no
past.
kidding! Wow,
Oh, the Godfather.
the original founder
Uh,
of In the Huddle. What do we do to deserve this?
Executive Vice Chairman
Henry,
Emeritus.
Amazing.
Hurricane Ren.
I wouldn't necessarily say that right now in upstate New York, but Eric, how you doing, buddy?
Hey, when duty calls, I answer. And the preeminent D3 Liberty League, but beyond Liberty League, the preeminent mass media specialists of Division III, football that I know and love are staring back at me in one place.
I know, right?
It's a little amazing. We wanted to bring you in. This was arranged because obviously nobody would have gotten former RPI All-American offensive tackle Eric Wren typed in time if we didn't know you were coming, but we did.
I like that. I'm looking at that. I mean, you've got like, holy smokes, look at this. I can put all this stuff up on the screen and read about things. And boy, I remember when I used to have to work the computer keyboard and try to like cue up music and
We might give him a little dose of that during this, but put that sign back up again.
just so you know, by the way, guys, this is like watching ESPN.
We're going to zoom in on you here because we want folks to see your late mother, Joyce Wren, who passed last year. Was it? Has it been a year, basically, almost?
August 1, 2020. So
wow.
Just a hair
Time
over
flies, bud. She made that sign for when we were doing it from your basement back when on Blog Talk radio version of In the Huddle when we were just doing audio. We had two L's in our name and everything else. And look at us now. We're the Indie D3FB Huddle.
Isn't it?
You're in the Huddle. Yeah. That's awesome.
Come on, Joyce Wren. She had it right.
Sure did.
Joyce and Stan were our biggest fans.
I was going to say, after every show, I would get the phone call, and they'd want to recap the show. And I said, can you give me a day or two? I've just been on the air for
2 hours.
90 minutes, 2 hours. I need a little downtime.
Oh, yeah, I remember the old days we tried to get people to call in. Remember that? It's like, Larry King 5 we were trying to be or something. It just wasn't working.
Callers.
Yeah.
A little bit of trivia, though. If I recall correctly, my memory serves me, that the format of the show originally wasn't even D3 football or Liberty League. I think we were trying to do something kind of cross between Rush Limbaugh, not really. Rush Limbaugh meets Howard Stern.
Oh boy!
I think our stuff on D3 Football's message boards made us kind of this odd yin and yang back when, and that hasn't changed much, I guess. Some people were just saying to us just a day ago, JB, that I'm too well liked right now. Something's wrong. So I don't know what it is, but I'm supposed to be the hated one still of the group because of my hard-hitting questions and dialogue. Whatever that means.
You're like the Howard to balance it. You're like the Howard Cosell of D3 football. You start off as the the arch nemesis, and then you do it so long that you grow to this lovable icon.
I don't know about that, Eric Wren.
What does that make James? Kirk Herbst, James.
I think I need to have shorter hair and like some frosted tips to pull that off.
He's Dandy Don Meredith.
Oh, okay.
Turn out the lights, the party's over.
Yeah, I can sing. Yeah.
So Eric, let's talk real briefly. RPI might not let visiting spectators in to watch your games. I know you and I have talked about the COVID situation and the challenges it presents and everything else. Make your plea. What's your thought about that type of situation at your alma mater? Go for it.
Well, and I don't know who's making that call. If that's the athletic department, I think you might have saw on the news, Frank. It was actually big news in the RPI and college community that Dr. Jackson, the longtime president, for the past 20 years, has announced her retirement. I don't know if she even weighed in on this. I really don't know. I'll tell you, it's interesting to hear, though, that that's what RPI is doing, because that stadium is so big that they could easily socially distance in that stadium with all the fans and not have a problem. I don't know. I really don't know. I mean, I live in Saratoga Springs, where on a weekend at this time of year, you drive through town and there's 15, 20,000 people at the track, and people are frequenting all the hot spots. So I don't know. I mean, I think RPI as an organization, as an institution, has played things very cautiously, very safe along the way throughout the administration's tenure. So it's not a surprise. I think as a player, former player, I'm sure that the program, the staff and the players are extremely thrilled to even have a chance to get out on the field. So I'm sure they'll take it at this point, and just to get out there. But it's certainly a disappointment. It's hard to say. I mean, I every day I read the news, and it's, the breakthrough cases are happening, and the young people, and it's, who knows if it's a matter of time before our country is shut down again.
Well, we're going to look at the implications later in the show of COVID still to this day for college football Division III. Obviously, people are still concerned about that, but let's not get too deep and dark here for the rest of the cold open. Eric, what you did and allowed me to do with you in 2008, it's amazing that it's still around. And in fact, a lot of people tell us that we were kind of the bright light for them during COVID. So if you didn't think we mattered in a lot of ways, people have been hitting us up already asking, when's your preseason show coming out for season 14? And here it is. Welcome back, folks. But, did you ever think that this would happen, that this was going to be a 14-year escapade possibly?
Well, no, partly because I would have assumed you would have been on national, major network TV by now, Frank, or running a law practice, somewhere with, very famously. But no, and all kidding aside, I mean, you never know where anything's going to go, right? But I can tell you this. I mean, you look at, to your point, through COVID and not having sports during much of this time, I see it from both sides. I see it from being on your side of the this side of the. It wasn't a camera; it was a microphone at the time. But it's amazing how much work goes into the production. I mean, certainly just the preparation that you and James have put in, and I remember it, being part of it, and I can only imagine how much more it's become, because I see the segments you guys do. I mean, you're before the pandemic. I mean, you were traveling places, you were meeting with people. It is truly a passion for anyone who does it, especially small college sports and broadcasting in general. I mean, Frank, unless things have changed, I don't believe you have a full production crew there helping you, holding the lights, holding the boom mic. Are you taking interns? Did you start taking interns now to help?
James's son is in the background, and maybe he's part of our production staff tonight. So
I mean, you are guys with full-time jobs, with families, with other interests, with careers. So to see the effort you put in on behalf of the small college, athlete, the schools, the programs, you're trying to do something that builds a culture around the sport. It's you turn on TV on any given weekend or Thursday night, and you're watching all the hype and hoopla and the coverage of Division I sports, and those are two people you see behind the camera talking to you, but what do you think there is? Dozens supporting them in terms of all the work, hundreds, all the work that goes into it. So the product you guys put out, it's just and the time and the passion you put in is fantastic, because it amplifies, it magnifies the different schools, the notoriety, the publicity that that these individual programs get at a small college level, where you're talking about fans that are really regional, are close knit to the program. It's fantastic. Your reach has spread beyond upstate New York and the Liberty League. It's fantastic to see the updates roll in on social media. It's just something you're doing that frankly, if you guys decide to hang it up, who's going to do it? I mean, it's almost like you must feel. I mean, this is me interviewing you now. Do you feel a little bit of an obligation to the small college football community to keep this going? I mean, I'm sure there's times you guys are tired and you've got other things to do, and you just, you're finding ways and late nights to put together the material for this.
Yeah, sometimes. I mean, I think ultimately what it boils down, though, is, what I recently heard from a parent from one of the Southeast teams that we've recently started to cover, and he, has a son who plays, I think, at the University of the South or Sewanee, and he's like, I'm obviously a little biased being a dad, and you're a dad too, Eric, so you know kind of how it goes, but it is the purest form of athletics at this level. I think it's really, the kids who do it play the game because they love it. They're not going to get paid for it. I mean, maybe with NIL they'll make a little bit of money now, but it's just there's something pure about it. It's kind of a niche thing, and I guess it's just something that we both have loved over the last 20 plus years of being alums, fans, etc. And it's just been a fun vehicle to sort of put these stories out there. And honestly, the best part of it, as you probably remember, it's just meeting the kids, hearing their story, learning about their families, where they've come from, where they're going. It's really been a special ride for sure.
Let me add, Eric, I think for you, me, even James, when he came on board initially, the one thing that hasn't changed for me is the interviews with the student athletes being the absolute highlight of doing this. And we're not going to have any, unfortunately, in this show. This is kind of more of the administrative stuff when you get out of the way. But we'll have more preseason stuff with actual player interviews coming up over the next week or so. But it's just amazing. Every time you go in, you're nervous about interviewing an 18 to 22-year-old, how they're going to do and everything else. And these days we ask them to come on the show, and without fail, they're like, absolutely, I know who you are, love your work, this and that. We do a call out for, like our In Their Own Words segment. We get 5, 6 really great ones we can all put together because they know who we are and trust us with it. And that's the thing. It's a trust factor. We've learned to trust that we're going to get some great student athletes from these schools, and they trust us enough to tell their stories or have their stories put out there. And that's, I think, what we've grown into, but never really realized 13 years ago that could really happen with this show.
Well, I'll tell you, you guys in my mind are kind of like a combination, a cross of Jimmy Fallon, Oprah, maybe Larry King, and a little.
You get a car, and you get a car.
Little Ellen. You guys really, tackle the human interest, the athletic side of it. I will tell you this. I mean, I love listening to James because James, you as a person who came into this, right? You didn't have necessarily the broadcasting experience that Frank did. Oh, there you go. Who you giving that away to? You didn't quite have the broadcasting that Frank did over the years, but nope. You're the quiet assassin with the statistics and the not. I mean, you could sit and rattle off the top of your head colleges, different parts of the country, small college athletics. Like I listen to guys talk about horses. Oh yeah, that horse ran a bad trip 2 weeks ago, and he's coming back, and this is his distance. I mean, you are the Svengali of statistics and college sports. You really are.
Okay,
it's a great gift to the table. This is my chance to This is my chance to speak for the general public out there because that's who I am now. I'm the general public. So the general public wants. Yeah, I know. He's a man. The general public wants you guys to know that you're doing such a great job, and it's really fantastic that you bring the acclaim and attention to not only individuals but the overall culture of small college football and athletics in general. You're always spot on with your commentary, not only tackling, you have the latitude in this platform too, to not only tackle just straight sports, but I think you guys put a really nice, analytical and social spin, where it's appropriate on things. And it's just, you keep it real. It's great.
Well, enough about us. We're going to have to talk about the Division III football season coming up.
Now, please send me the Venmo payment that you promised for some.
Got the phone right here. We're ready to go. Yeah. Was that $17.50 per word you said or something like that?
Right.
Anyway, thank you for joining us. I know you've been through a lot, especially over the last year and a half of everything that's going on, and you've been through support for us
It's life.
along the way.
We all do it.
Yep,
It's
exactly.
life. I was actually thinking I might have to run up to my office. I know right where my helmet is. I was going to put it on because I remember watching James put one on and Frank put one on, and I thought, oh, this is great. We get to get the uniforms back on.
You might see one in the intro coming up here, buddy. So let me just say, folks, thanks to Eric Wren for joining us here, Senor Red Tackle, as he used to be known. And folks,
that's right.
It's finally time. It is time for episode 1 of season 14 of In the Huddle. Well, thanks again to Eric Wren for joining us. Senor Red Tackle, always great, and we thank him for the accolades and the views that he gave throughout that. A little bit longer than we thought. Yeah, exactly. A little bit longer than we thought that would go, but, it's been a long road. The year and a half that we've pretty much had to piece together shows and what's next and everything else. It's been a lot, and he's experienced a lot himself in his personal life and whatnot, but he's always been there for us, and we appreciate him immensely. We appreciate you immensely. You've been hitting us up, season 14. This is it. Welcome to season 14, and we happen to be in Orlando at James's humble abode. This is actually his accessory apartment that he comes to
Frank's
shoot.
Place.
Yeah, basically when he has to shoot a show when everybody is asleep, because we do a lot of night shows, he comes up here and shoots it. And so we appreciate his family's understanding as always, and having me here. But JB, we've got a lot to talk about here. I'm just looking down our script here for this show. We've got pretty much, we hate to do it to you folks, but a little bit of a COVID conversation we have to have with you still at this point in time. We're going to talk about the new region system this year in Division III, and one mistake that we think they made that might get resolved at some point, but probably not this season. It's a little late for that.
Yeah.
We'll also have, our top 25. Going to be a little surprising.
Why not?
Yeah.
Hey.
Some teams that might be missing in your view, some that I think we, knocked out of the park pretty much, but you might not agree yet. We'll see what happens. It's a big guess. We'll talk more about that.
Yep.
Also, we're going to reveal where I'm traveling to in week 1 for some pre and post game antics, some in-game Twitter stuff, and a whole lot more. So stay tuned for that. I think you gave away a couple of them on
Twitter.
Kind
of the worst kept secret in Division III football, but everyone wants to have Frank show up at their stadium. Well, maybe not everybody, but.
So when we were doing the cold open, we held this up, and we want to thank the folks that put this together, the College Football America 2021 yearbook, and we not cover up the entire name.
At least you're not putting it over my face.
Yeah, we're getting a little bit of a glare here, so I'll make sure I get it close enough for folks to see it. But it is pretty much Division 1, 2, and 3, and NAIA.
Easy for me to say. JUCO, I think it's basically every football team in the country, and so they reached out to us as certainly it was one of those things. I think it actually might have been. I might have even initiated contact and been like, hey, I'm curious about this. I mean, obviously, both you and I had contributed to D3Football.com's kickoff for many years. There really isn't going to be anything like that, probably, at least not this season. Who knows about the future? But this was actually a pretty good overview. It's about 20 to 30, 40 pages worth of information on D3. They do their own rankings. They have, and honestly, I think what I liked the best was this part here with all the team capsules that lists the schedules of every single D3 team in the country. So if, for some reason you can't get to a website, or, if you're old fashioned like me, you want to just flip to a page, look it up on a little, sheet of paper, like, oh, okay, so they're playing Bellhaven on Thursday. September 20th type of deal.
Should I keep that nearby during the show? Because
Maybe,
we might need it.
We might actually. This might be something we use all season. So thanks, guys.
We should say at the top, this is only part one of our preseason shows here.
We're too long-winded to just do one.
We're going to actually focus on some of the regions specific to what we're going to cover this season. So we'll tell you more about that in a little bit, but be aware this is kind of the catch-all show, a national perspective show, and then we're going to go a little bit more regional next week. This is probably dropping on Tuesday, as we had predicted, and so Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, we kind of predict putting out 4 smaller shows about the regions we'll be covering. That might give away a little bit here, but COVID. So we've been through a lot. We know we've been through a lot here, and we ain't done yet. Delta, it's a word that we hear in a lot of different senses and fraternities if you're a student athlete and stuff. But the Delta variant of COVID is causing issues across the country. There's no doubt. How much does your vaccination protect you in reality? And that leads to another question too. As I say vaccination, what schools are going to require them and which aren't? And that's going to play a certain role here too as we get deeper into the season and Delta rears its head. Many people think that we'll see a subsiding of the Delta variant numbers by the end of September, but that means that the first month of college football in Division III or wherever you are is going to be exposed to the potential problems it can still bring. You looked at the NCAA guidance on this. We reached out to some friends as well along the way to kind of make heads or tails of this. JB, what is your sense here of what could happen in a worst case scenario with the current COVID situation?
Well, I mean, a worst case situation is going to be probably cancellations of games and possible suspension of seasons, at least the short term. I mean, for better or for worse, the vaccination and unvaccination protocols do create sort of separate and segregated student populations. And so you may get to a point where there's enough to, guys to field a team, but that puts them at risk for injuries if there's not enough substitutions. It just depends. I mean, some football coaches you talk to, if their college president or AD is telling them that everyone's going to be vaccinated, a college football coach is going to make sure that happens. And there's going to be no questions. Maybe there will be some waivers or whatnot and this kind of thing, but the football coach will, get the info and they'll do what they have to do. But for the kids that are unvaccinated for whatever reason, and even some of the kids who are vaccinated, like let's say there's going to be kids out there that they're going to get this breakthrough thing, and it's going to affect them, and they may be asymptomatic. They might, just have more like flu-like symptoms, but they'll have to quarantine and the contact tracing. And we're not out of this whole thing yet by even a long shot. We
had presented some discussion on NIL with Matt Land, who is the athletic director at Trine University. And we actually asked a question in that interview that we pulled out from the NIL discussion because we wanted to make sure we focused on NIL in that show. But this was a few weeks back, and we discussed with him where we've been and where we're going as far as COVID goes, because Trine was pretty much ahead of the pack in the fall, still playing games and whatnot, how they got through that and what his sight of what's next is. And it's actually really worth the listen. So please watch this.
What were some of the lessons that you've learned over that? Over that process, and what kind of advice would you give to schools that they're trying to get back online for the first time in, almost 2 years now?
I think the most impactful thing that I said, and I kind of used as my own personal motto during all of this was, I want to be the person, and we want to be the athletic department, and we want to be the school that finds reasons to play, not finds reasons not to play, if that makes any sense at all. It made a lot of sense to me and to us in our department and our school, because athletics is important. This has been my whole life. I have played or coached or now athletic director at a school, and I'm even coaching still. I'm helping with my son's high school team. My whole life people need to understand, yes, they are coming to every university to get a degree, and that's the number one priority, and there is no second guessing that statement. But they also are athletes and want to be an athlete. We have to respect that too. They came to our school to play football. We have a strong academic profile of incoming freshmen, and so you can be both. A couple things. Sometimes people like to shy away from the athletic side of the university. Some schools, we put it on the front porch for everybody to see. We are a school that believes and will support athletics to the hilt. And first and foremost, we are an outstanding academic institution, and you can do both. And we've been able to show that. With respect to playing again after 60 days, you can play. As administrators, we have to do some stuff that we don't. We gave 30,000 tests last year. Every single one of my fall sports played in the fall, the winter, and the spring, and everybody played in the spring. You can find a way. Yes, you're going to have canceled games. Yes, you're going to have canceled practices. You're going to have to quarantine people. That's just part of what's going on right now. It's part. Again, I want to embrace things, so we embraced the suck, right? I'm a Cubs fan. That was a big thing a few years ago. Embrace the suck. And sometimes you just got to do it. For me to do my job, if I am not athletic directoring, for lack of a better term, a football game or a baseball game or a softball game, there's no need for me. My job's to find ways to play our games and get our kids the experience that we sold them when we recruited them. That's my job. And I take it very seriously. So we rolled up our sleeves and put on our white smock and mask and gloves and tested people 3 times a week, the entire school year. And we quarantined and told people you could not play to this week or these 2 weeks, you're out. And we just rotated our roster. I told my coaches from the get-go, we have a game scheduled. We have enough people to play. We're going to go play. I don't care who those kids are. Those kids deserve to play. And if you want to think about it in a different way, now you have an opportunity to take the bottom half of your roster, get them very valuable experience early in their career that they probably wouldn't have gotten in a regular year. That's valuable too. So you can call it semantics or sales or whatever you want. It doesn't matter. We were going to play the games. However you want to sell it, however you have to sell it to yourself to get through it. It was hard. I mean, it was hard. A lot of really sad and hard discussions and daily, very difficult, uncomfortable decisions that had to be made, as you deal with these kids and those kind of things. But for lack of a better term, if you're adult enough to make those decisions, you can do it. And we just stuck our neck out there. I think coming back after 600 days, you need to make sure that the coaches have been on them this summer about their conditioning level coming into camp. A lot of times some of the older players will be able to just kind of cruise into camp a little bit, kind of use camp to get in shape. We hope not, but there's reality also. That's not, I don't think, an option right now. You've got to come in camp in shape, ready to go, and then use camp to get in better shape, to get in football shape by the time you play the first game, because your smaller, your joint activity, right, is going to be far less. The stress you're putting on those. So when you're looking at knee joint injuries, those are the ones that you're going to see because they haven't used those stabilizing muscles in a very, very long time the way they use them. And when you go from 0 to 100%, that's when things get hurt. So conditioning and programming into your first probably 10 practices, some things of varying levels of exertion.
So AD Land is basically saying to us it's going to be an interesting yin and yang between schools with the vaccination requirements and the not vaccination requirements out there. As we learn more about Delta variant breakthrough cases, et cetera, and what the vaccination is and is not able to do, that's going to be interesting as well. It's going to be another, I think, baptism by fire for all of us as we try to learn how to navigate through this. The schools, as he said, may be getting into more fights, not less fights about things down the line. It's very possible that things are going to be rougher in the discussions. Yep. But the important part here, we're playing. And that's something that we've been standing by since last March. Let them play. And it looks like the schools are all letting them play. We've heard nobody backing off that idea right now, because I think there is enough understanding, enough science, enough tolerance of the situation to understand that the right thing to do right now is to let them play, get the vaccinations in place, and see where we go from there and react if we need to later on. However, we're hearing of schools that are going to, as we said in the cold open, RPI for instance, potentially not allow visiting fans on campus.
Right.
That's an interesting problem, because where does the science stand on that? The science says you're outdoors, socially distanced, you're okay. I don't necessarily get that, and I hope that they revisit that one.
Yeah, I mean, there's plenty of examples where we've seen, obviously in recent weeks even, I mean, where outdoor events are back and they can happen safely. And, there's the biggest challenge, and it's kind of something that's been affecting our country for a few years now, is that there isn't going to be a single rule that every school and every conference and everyone's going to follow. Each institution is going to have its own rules. Each conference is going to have a twist on it. The SAA, for instance, tweeted today about their basic COVID policies and attendance policies for the fall, and they basically had a few of the the line item ones that follow NCAA and the CDC and so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, they were very specific in saying that it's ultimately up to the host institutions on what they want to do.
Yeah, and
that may change over the course of several weeks. Now, certain conferences like our sort of origins within the Huddle with two L's. The Liberty League is going to be pretty regionalized. Everyone's within a few hours of each other. They're not really going to leave New York State. Now, other conferences like maybe the NUMAC, where you have teams in New England that have to go down to Washington, D.C., or vice versa, it's a different story. The Southeast, is a little more spread out. The SAA, ASC is more centrally located in Texas, but Texas is the size of, it's pretty big too. So it'll change, it'll evolve, and I think one thing that we'll just learn kind of each week is just kind of hold your breath and hope that everything kicks off, not like we saw in the spring near the end of that spring season, where all of a sudden we had one cancellation, then two, and then five, and then 10, and by
half the games basically cancel each week toward the end of it. Yep, absolutely. So we'll see where it goes, but don't expect perfection in this by any stretch of the imagination, folks. It's not going to happen. But let's all work to make sure we get as close to that as possible. Be safe out there, and make sure you get your vaccination if you have not done so already, and booster shot when they advise to do that. Okay, regionalization. So we decided that the 4-region system was broken for some reason. Even though regions per se don't matter anymore, it's a weird thing that they decided they're going to do it anyway, and have different numbers of ranked teams in each region, because there's different number of teams in each of these regions now. There are 6 regions, and they're beautifully named Region 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, instead of a regional name like New England, Mid-Atlantic,
Southeast,
or South even, Great Lakes,
Midwest,
and West. Yeah. That would have been great.
West Coast.
So let's look at this and let's play the what really went wrong here question. So Region 1 really is New England. CCC, ECFC, MASCAC, NESCAC, NUMAC, and MAC. And don't forget the NESCAC does not play in the playoffs. So those 10 teams, while it makes it 53, kind of is really 43 teams in that region. Region 2, we would call the Mid-Atlantic, basically, lovingly here. Empire 8, Liberty League, NJAC, and Centennial, which kind of goes away from the Mid-Atlantic per se, because it's, but Johns Hopkins, for instance, is in there, so there's some nexus to it.
Yeah.
Region 3, we call the South, because it's the ODAC, the President's Conference. Okay, that's not really the South, but they've always been in the South region for some reason, so why change? The SAA and the USA South.
Yep.
No American Southwest Conference, though. Let's see where they put them.
I wonder.
Region 4, the Heartland, Michigan Intercollegiate. That's also the, MIAA, we should call that. Yep. The NCAC, North Coast, and the Ohio Athletic Conference. And so 36 teams there, just like in Region 3. By the way, Region 2 only had 32 teams. That's an interesting note to give you. Then Region 5, which we're calling the West, or I'm sorry, the Midwest.
Midwest?
It's the Midwest,
Okay.
I would call it. I'm looking back at this. Great Lakes would have been the previous one with Michigan, Ohio.
Right.
Watch us do geography lessons live on our show right now. Yeah. The ARC, the MWC, the NAC, and the CCIW are in there with 39 teams. Then we bulk up to 52 teams for some unknown reason in Region 6, the West, which includes the American Southwest Conference, the MIAC, the NWC, the SCIAC, the WIAC, and the UMAC. Why? What would have happened if you put the ASC to Region 3 and made that 46 teams and this one 42 teams ultimately? It would have been smarter. And I just don't get what they're attempting to do here. What was the reasoning to do this besides maybe keeping sports, I guess, cohesive in how the regionalization was working? But, you know, football is its own animal as it is. I don't see the need to have done this.
Well, maybe it's to do something around the ranking and when you read off the conferences in Region 6, and I think I read this from a poster on the D3 boards. I think the last 20 Stag Bowls had a team from one of these conferences in it over the last 20 years.
Well, yeah, I think the WIAC for how many years had
Whitewater.
Thank you, and Oshkosh was in there, and UMHP, et cetera. So yeah, that's true.
And St. Thomas before they got the boot, they had St. John's. It's just it is a heavily concentrated grouping of kind of the super
Pacific Lutherans out there too.
That have Linfield has been a national championship contender in the last couple decades. So it is kind of strange that this whole thing got grouped up. Now I feel at the end of the day, Frank, and we'll talk to friends like Jim Catanzaro or others. Dewey Nats I think is back in charge.
He's the chair. Yep.
He's been on the show in the past, so I assume he'll join us yet again. And we'll talk about whether or not this whole structure even matters, because I have a feeling at the end of the day, it's, especially with some of the challenges of COVID and how much money has been lost, it's going to boil down to how do we make the least amount of flights and kind of set up the bracket, sort of like we've always had. I mean, maybe it leaves certain teams on the bubble to being picked as a Pool C, which I think the number is still 5 for this season. So it might make it a little more interesting there for a little while, but at the end of the day, I think, because it's so geared towards the Pool A automatic qualifier, the tournament's going to look like it kind of always does, but we'll see.
Yeah, it affects only how many teams are up for consideration ultimately at the same time for Pool C. Instead of just 4 teams being lined up, it's now 6 teams being lined up each round.
Yeah.
But there's so few Pool C spots that you would have to think that it shouldn't matter. Now, we know enough to know it might matter slightly, but it's going to affect possibly the 32nd team picked. I say that, but I believe North Central was the 32nd team picked last go around. They won the championship.
Yeah.
So 32 might matter. So we'll see where it goes. Yep. So what does that mean for our coverage here? Because obviously we were an East Region show for a while. Here's basically your answer. Region 1, New England, Region 2, Mid-Atlantic, and Region 3 are all going to be covered by us. And Region 4 is going to have some level of coverage as well by us. And Regions 5 and 6 will have less of us because it's just outside our ability to travel to some of these areas, so we can't dedicate the same level of coverage like me going to visit the teams or the games. We're going to throw in the ASC into the mix of conferences we do give a bigger concentration to, because I'm a little bit able to, and maybe from time to time you will be able to, JB, get to games in those zones of the ASC.
Yeah.
But the whole goal here is to try to give you each week a scoreboard show, interviews, highlights, etc., like you're used to from what we did in the spring especially.
Yeah.
But it's going to be a little more diluted because we're going to have more games per week that we're covering.
Yeah.
But don't worry. Nationally, for the other regions, if there are big stories or close games or exciting highlights, we're going to bring them to you. You know, we're not going to just lob off a portion of the D3 country here.
Yeah, exactly.
We're going to do what we can, but we also realize that it's just two of us and a 60-minute show to the degree we can make it such, with a couple maybe extra pieces throughout the week.
Yep.
So, you know, bear with us. We're going to try to get our legs under us on how to handle this the first couple of weeks, but we're going to give you the best possible coverage we can because we feel you deserve it, and we're not sure what other outlets are going to do throughout this. You know, a lot of questions came up. Well, you know, no kickoff from D3Football.com. Well, no, there's not. If you want some coverage there, the College Football America yearbook that we talked to you about might be a good fill-in at least for that. But you will at least get something, you know, from D3Football.com every year, and probably the same Stag Bowl coverage and playoff coverage that we're used to. I hope to still be at the sideline for Canton for
Return of Sparkle Man.
Yes, thank you.
In freezing your you-know-what of.
In Canton, Ohio, in December.
The 17th. Oh, man. Oh.
Yeah. We'll talk about that soon, I'm sure. But and how many layers I'm going to need underneath that jacket.
It's only 4 months away, Frank.
Thanks, appreciate you. So anyway, we've got a lot coming up here this season. We're excited about it. We're somewhat recharged from the spring, although that was interesting going through that because we didn't expect to bring you that much coverage, and so it takes a toll on you. But we're back, and we're glad that you're back, and the football is back here for sure.
Yep.
Okay, now that we sound like great diplomatic folks, we're going to now present to you our top 25.
Why not?
So we're going to go through number 25 through 11 a little more quickly and then concentrate a little bit more on 10 through 1. So fasten your seatbelt. If you think you're in the top 10, go get a snack here while we put this together. And here we go.
Here we go.
At number 25, DePaul. They were one of the teams that did have some exposure to spring football.
Yep.
And Central at number 24, the Dutch, I believe, had one game as well. Was it one or two games? I'm trying to think back here. Two games. And both of them, it's interesting because Central, it was a team that D3Football.com had much higher, I think in the 14 range. We got them at 24. It's tough to really gauge, and let's say this right now, it's tough to gauge when you have two sets of data that have almost nothing to do with each other in terms of the top 25 that we ended with in 2019, and then this top 25 we did at least for the spring, piecing this all together. Just because you played in the spring doesn't mean that you're automatically on this list or vice versa. If you didn't, you may be included in this list, especially as a higher up team. We'll talk about why for those teams in a bit, but let me just be specific here. It was tough to do this, and I think even the D3Football.com voters, with the number of others receiving votes, it's emblematic of a situation where you don't have enough data to really give decisive views on where these teams land.
Yeah, and I think one of the disclaimers for every single one of these polls, Frank, has got to be the fact that literally half of these rosters for every team in Division III is made up of anywhere from 50 to 70, let's say. Man, I know that some schools like Mount Union and UMHB have these 200 plus rosters, so maybe there's 100 freshmen and sophomores. They've never played it down at college football. We don't know if the next future Gallardi Trophy winner is at St. John's or at Mount Union or whatever that's up and comer. So we're going to be making some assumptions based on what we saw in the spring, what we know sort of the historical track record of these teams are and their coaching staffs and so on. But, don't be surprised in week one if you see some major upsets, just because there's going to be a lot of players in this season that we've never even heard of before.
Yep. Yeah, 100%. So we go back to the reason why we got into that discussion. Central is 24 on ours, but 14 in D3Football.com. Hanover, a team that we went back and forth on when we were discussing this. It's at number 23, but the weeks they played and the experience they got, they seemed to be growing as that spring season went forward, and they've got an exciting offense to say the least. So I look forward to see what they can produce. And then Whitworth at number 22, Mr. Peliquin, who we had on the show. Ethan did a great job for them. They've got a lot of their pieces back from what we can tell offensively, especially. And they're going to be a team to contend with out west this season. Heidelberg is number 21, and you know the story there. It's a team in the OAC that didn't perform well against Mount Union. We get it, but a team that really grew through the season. And
in spite of some pretty serious challenges.
Yeah, for those that weren't with us in the spring, go ahead.
Well, they lost one of their senior linebackers to an unfortunate accident and passed away. And so I mean, the fact that they were able to continue to even keep going and play for that OAC championship says a lot about their resolve. And this is one of those things where, on just based on their record, the games that they won, and what they've overcome, I think they deserve to be in the top 25.
Yeah, and still in our memory, Curtis Hellman passing away, just still sad. And obviously the team came together and gelled to get their divisional title before losing to Mount Union in the championship game. So we'll see how they respond from that. Coach Donaldson, has been very supportive of our show after all that, and we've been supportive of their program. That is not why they're showing up on this list. They play some great football there, and they grew a lot from this. And the maturity level that you gain from those situations, you can't write that down. It's an intangible, honestly. Bethel in the MIAC in number 20. And this is one of those, hey, St. Thomas isn't in the MIAC anymore, and this is going to be a team that may gain from that fact, exposure-wise and experience-wise. We'll see what happens there. Union College in number 19, and our friend Will Bellamy and his receiver Will Sermon that we talk to every so often are probably going to be mad at us because D3Football.com had them in at number 15. We have them at 19. It's still very good, our top 20.
Yeah.
I'm sure that you shuffle a couple points here or there, and they would have been actually in the 15 range for us. So it's no slight on Union. They're a good team, and they have a lot of experience coming back, to say the least. Randolph-Macon, the winners of the ODAC, in at 18. Hendricks at number 17 after the SAA runner-up scenario. Brockport at 16. Now, this is going to be an interesting season for Brockport because I think defensively they're going to be their normal selves. It's going to be a question of how's that offense looking ultimately, the pieces that they need to put into place, and they had some struggles in that last go-around in 2019. They pieced it together, obviously, but it's going to be very, very tough, I think, for them to repeat again in a very tough Empire 8 scenario. We'll see what happens, but we think they have a pipeline to get enough players to at least make a statement and maybe still win it, but it's not going to be easy out there.
Absolutely.
Del Val at number 15. And, Shamir Vessels transferred from Wesley to there before Wesley's announcement earlier this year that they would not be in existence any longer. And that's tough for us to swallow still, as I say that. Yeah. But Delaware Valley definitely kind of pumping their chests out on social media right now.
Yeah. And I think defensively they have, sort of the moxie to get away with that, but they did lose some pretty critical parts of their offense from 2019, and so it'll be interesting to see. I mean, they'll still be a favorite going into the season to probably win the MAC, and the fact that they're in Region 1 from Pennsylvania with all these New England schools, that's kind of a weird matching up there, but long story short, the Aggies are probably the team to beat, and we'll have to wait and see, how they backfill certain key positions. But they, once again, kind of like Brockport, steady, just still hitting the recruiting trail hard and getting a lot of talented athletes for their team.
Yeah, and that's one thing we did bring up. Putting them into the MAC does put them into a very odd positioning when we were looking at these regions earlier. So I'm not sure why they insisted on doing that just the same way. They could have put them into Region 2 and balanced out with 42 and 43 teams, although the NESCAC might be the cause of it at the end of the day for them. So interesting problem, and another thing that maybe they'll iron out later. Here we go. Washington and Jefferson in at number 14, and they were the runners-up to Westminster in the PAC championship game. They bring a lot of teams back, or a lot of players back. Excuse me, a lot of teams back. No, they bring a lot of players back, though. A lot of seniors, and Coach Sirianni and company are very confident about how the season is looking, so we'll see where it goes for them.
Yep.
And then Barry in at number 13, the winners of the SAA championship back in the spring. That was a great championship game in Little Rock. Westminster in at number 12. So just talking about how they've beaten Washington and Jefferson for the PAC championship. Some people are not believers right now. Westminster, we'll see what they're made of in that first game of the season, the Mount Union game. More on that in a little bit, folks. And number 11, Muhlenberg. The Mules have Mike Nakowski back, I believe, as quarterback, and so that's a big thing. But some folks are not confident that they can repeat even as Centennial Conference champions here, as Susquehanna may make a peep, they feel. Yeah. Johns Hopkins is always there, too. So Muhlenberg's getting an interesting treatment here. And you know what? I think your good old coaching friend there down at Muhlenberg, or
Coach Nate.
He's going to kind of salivate the disrespect level for not being in the top 10 in either our poll or the D3Football.com poll.
I think, Coach Nate, being a Hobart guy like myself, will probably embrace that underdog mentality, or it's a chip on their shoulder a little. They were a Final Four team, and they had a great season in 2019. But are the Frankie Feasters back? No, it's a different kind of defense. It'll be a different type of personnel type of situation. So it'll be interesting to see how the Mules handle. Kind of that added pressure of being the top dog in the conference and having that target on their back and getting everybody's, best shot week after week. But they certainly could do it again. And in that Region 2 lineup, it sets them up for a potential top seed, depending on how the other New York and other conferences kind of beat each other up.
But again, they're not in the top 10. So let's look at our top 10 teams a little more slowly here. First off, Wisconsin Oshkosh in at number 10. This is interesting because this is a team that, has not been back to the Stag Bowl since, 2016? But they seem to keep their engines running here. They seem to be doing well still and seem to have a chance to still, overturn Wisconsin Whitewater each time they play them. Right. And as such, you can imagine Wisconsin Whitewater is going to be above them somewhere here. But this is a team that's got national prominence still.
Yeah, and I think, when you look at the whole WIAC conference, the size of the schools, the importance of football to that upper Midwestern region. They're getting some great talented athletes, and they have a track record, and they've been kind of the runner up in the conference a few times now. I know they've sort of split with I think lacrosse in the past couple seasons, like one beats the other and vice versa, and they haven't really been able to get over the hump with Whitewater. But you put them in a NCAA tournament game, even if they're the road team, and in most cases they're probably going to be favored.
Let's go to number 9, Linfield. Now that's a team that a lot of people are starting to feel like, maybe they're running into a wall here a little bit. They've had all these decades of success and everything else, but you just can't count them out. I had my exposure to them when they came to see Rowan, and I don't believe they're going to return the favor this year. Yeah. But Linfield is still a force to be reckoned with in the West.
Yeah, and from at least what we know, they have a pretty strong core of players coming back from a team that won a conference championship, and so you got to give them some benefit of the doubt and respect, because when they get into the tournament, they can hang with pretty much anybody. So we'll see.
Number 8, Salisbury, a team that played in spring, had basically the NJAC quasi-title scenario there. Jack Lanham and company, they still do what they do very well. They seem like they had some bumps a little bit during some of the games in the spring that they played, but they pulled it all together. And I think now that they're back in normal practice force, Lanham and company are going to be that much better. And probably, if I look quickly here, that is the top East or former East region team, we'll call it, in our survey here. and this survey is JB and I will be full disclosure on this, but we used our spring rankings and the 2019 rankings that we had between us to formulate this on the information we have. So Salisbury in at number 8, and I believe that actually matches D3Football.com in this case.
Yeah. Most what we saw that we had some real overlap with the D3Football.com poll was really in the top 10. 11 to 25, there were certain cases where there was some overlap. I think you and I, having really seen the Pack and SAA games really not necessarily up close in person, but we followed those games pretty closely. They were great. Those conferences have always been highly regarded. So I think we maybe gave them a little bump that the national sort of other voters may not have done or have seen, so on and so forth. But yeah, I mean, Salisbury, very unique kind of an offensive system with the triple option, but they can still spread it out and throw the ball on you. Once again, a long time kind of success with recruiting strong athletes, and so we'll get to see them pretty early on. They have a huge game in week 2 against Whitewater in Maryland. One of our local buddies here is trying to get me to fly up for that. We'll see, but the Gulls are going to be a force to be reckoned with, not just in the East but nationally.
In at number 7, St. John's, now pretty much the top dog in the MIAC. If you have to really think about that for long, you don't know the MIAC. Now that St. Thomas is gone from there, who's going to compete against them? Bethel will make some peeps, I'm sure, but it's going to be an interesting MIAC this season to see how it all plays out. Maybe they would be higher if St. Thomas was in here, because maybe we would feel a little bit more confident about not just where they are, but where they're going here.
Yeah, or if there's a guy named Jackson Erdman who is back.
That's true, too. Good call. I like that thought.
I'm sure that his backup or his heir apparent is also fairly talented, but Erdman was kind of a once-in-a-decade type of QB, I would say. I mean,
still trying to find some pro traction right now.
Yeah. So I mean, he was definitely a rarefied heir. So you got to give the Johnnies that kind of credit. And I think also too, like you said, without St. Thomas, part of the reason I think, at least for me anyway, you can speak for yourself, but part of the reason why I put Bethel in my top 25 was because the reality is that the runner-up in the MIAC is going to get a Pool C bid probably. If they're 9-1 and their only loss is to St. John's, who's undefeated, that team's getting into the field.
Yeah, 8-2 may be tough now with the situation. Although we did lose 10 teams or 9 teams in the division, so things are a little bit more diluted when you think about it. But 8-2 will still be tough with only 5 Pool C bids. If that's the accurate number ultimately here. Number 6 is the runner-up to Mary Hardin Baylor in the ASC championship game in the spring. It was blanked on the conference name there. But if we took the first half alone of that game, you wouldn't think they belong in the top 10. But second half, they almost tied the game in the end. And it's a credit to Kyle Jones and company. The real deals, I think, in the ASC and Hardin Simmons. Look. It's one of those 1A, 1B scenarios, but they've been 1B so much that a lot of people are not believing in them anymore. You predicted they would win against Mary Hardin Baylor, and they did.
A lot of fans in Dalton.
Yep. And then I think you lost some fans with the Hardin Simmons crew, because at the end you said they might not be able to get over the hump. Can they do it this go around?
Yeah, I mean, they're going to have to do the proverbial Pedro Martinez. They for a long time, the Crusaders have been their daddy, and they eventually just have to beat them and kind of put that behind them and get that championship that they've been close, and they certainly can do some damage in a national tournament, and they certainly will probably end up there possibly. But they have to figure out a way to get one over on the Crusaders, and they really fell apart in the first half of that game. It looks like they were just, I don't know if they were psyched out, what happened, but once they started believing in themselves, they came back. And had there been a little more time, who knows?
Number 5 is a team that beat the national champions in 2019, the year they won the national championship. It's Wheaton. And, it's the forgotten fact of 2019 is that Wheaton did beat NCC early in the season, and still that's why they had to become a Pool C team to reach the championship and win it in North Central. Wheaton in at number 5, and they bring a decent number of players back. And some people actually have them picked above NCC to win the CCIW this go around.
Yeah, well, no Brock Rudder in Naperville is going to help theoretically, although there could be some D1 transfers or other stuff going on there that we'll have to wait and see how that plays out. The defending champs don't play until week 2, so we won't really know for a little while. But the Thunder had one of the best offenses in the country, one of the best running backs in the country, and they can play defense. So yeah, they have the full package, and any team like that, especially at that high level in a conference like the CCIW, really deserves to be up in the top 5.
Let the controversy begin at number 4. D3Football.com's number 1 team is our number 4 team, UMHB. This one really was a head scratcher for me when I saw the D3Football.com poll come out, because in reality, you and I watched a team in the spring that really struggled to find their offensive identity, I would say, quarterback-wise, etc. And I think the spring was very useful. If they didn't have the spring, I think they would lose 2 games this season. I'll be honest with you.
Yeah.
Now, could they lose 1 game this season against, let's say, Hardin Simmons, perhaps? Sure, they could.
Maybe.
It's possible. But what I'm feeling here, and I think you agree with this, is that this team was not better than Mount Union in the spring.
No.
And so how do you impute suddenly that they're the better team than Mount Union in the fall? Yeah. I don't quite
gotta watch
get it.
The games, man.
Yeah.
And to the Crusaders' credit, I mean, they had this young, inexperienced offensive line that over the course of the spring season really came together and started to dominate. And the big reason why Hardin Simmons was kind of blown out in the first half of that championship game was because that offensive line just took control and demolished the Cowboys up front. And it was really impressive. Now, that alone might make you think, okay, that kind of a line coming back could give you a number 1, type of ranking. But the quarterback play, once again, we're seeing, kind of sub 50% completion percentages, a lot of what I'll call RPO, but with a capital R, a little P, and a big O. Not great passing numbers. A lot of more quarterbacks that are able to run and break some runs open. But that is not a national championship kind of formula, in my opinion. The defense and the Jefferson Fritzes and all that will get you some pick sixes, and the special teams that they have over there in Belton is amazing, probably the best in the country. But if you don't have a quarterback that can throw the ball, like a Braxton Plunk, for instance, it's going to be hard to win a title.
Yeah, I don't get it. I still don't. I think that Mount Union is better on both sides of the ball. Just making that comparison. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But we got 2 other teams we got to talk about before possibly Mount Union, if that's our number 1 team, which we're not sure yet. We'll see in a second. Number 3, Wisconsin Whitewater. A team that we wish had played in the spring, because I think we would have learned a lot more about them. But a team that seemed like in 2019 with Max Myler and company were really on the way to something big in 2020 if they had been able to play.
Yeah.
Now, I think we're going to see exactly who they are, and I honestly believe that they still are that team. They are a pipeline. For the same reason we still put Rockport in the top 20, we put Whitewater in the top 5 still, because they are still that team, okay? They still have the name. And we heard some interesting rhetoric from other Wisconsin teams, or one in particular, their athletic director, about what they needed to do to try to knock them off the perch.
Yeah.
Well, that should tell you right there that they believe that the perch is still there for a team like Whitewater and Oshkosh, for that matter, but especially Whitewater.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the Warhawks have been they've been so consistent, and even if they're not, winning, 6 Stag Bowls like they were for that one stretch, they were the runner-up in 2019. They're always in the national conversation, kind of constant Final Four quality team, just because of like you said, the pipeline, the facilities, all the things they have going for them. So I think once again, we'll see. I mean, it's possible that this Warhawks team, though, I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if they went to Salisbury and lost that game in week 2. It might, it probably wouldn't derail their season per se, and they could still get a very high seed if they ran the table and won the WIAC. But there's enough about that team that we just don't know, like you said, because 2020 they didn't really get to do anything, and in the spring they weren't around, so it might take them a while to to get their act together. But then again, we might see them in week 1 and be like, whoa, you know.
Absolutely. And so this is going to be interesting to see how they do turn out.
Yep.
The WIAC is always a tough conference. And so if they win it, they're going to prove themselves to be all that and then some here.
Sure.
North Central in at number 2. The reigning national champs. Well, at least on the field, we named our own for the spring, obviously, but on the field, it's the reigning Stag Bowl champs. How's that? Is that how we say now?
Yep.
They are still a very solid team. They bring back quite a few players still on both sides of the ball, and they are getting Division I transfers to attend. When you win a national championship, and you create a pipeline, especially a team in that geographic region, it is not that tough to draw, let's say, middling players in the Division I FCS context to come down to Division III whatever you want to call it, come to Division III at a school like NCC that especially now has a proven track record. So the extra time may have actually helped North Central to get ammoed up for this season. I don't know if Coach Storm would necessarily agree with me on that or at least admit that, but at the same time, I can't see a reason to take them down further to number 2 until proven otherwise right now.
Yeah, and I said before, we'll have to wait a couple weeks to see them on the field, but yeah, you have to give them credit for that amazing season that they had in 2019, and there's still some key players from that championship team. That running back receiver, he was uncoverable, and no one could stay with that guy. He's back, and that alone gives you probably 21 points in a game right out of the gate, regardless of who you're playing.
Yep.
So it's going to be one of those situations where they're the defending champs from the Stag Bowl, and a lot of people will be gunning for them. But like you said, with that extra year, especially with some of the roster changes and some of the schools that have gone away, and changes in NCAA eligibility rules and whatnot, you could see some interesting new players on that squad that could get them right back to where they were in 2019.
And number 1. No surprise, Mount Union. Look, they were the best team out there in the spring. We can't say any different than that. And that most of those guys are back again in the fall that were seniors in the spring. You go to Mount Union to play football if you're a football player. I don't think we're, giving short shrift to the academics there and everything else. Okay, but Mount Union football is something special that you go there to play. Okay, you don't go there to have a year off because of a COVID situation or just play 4 or 5 games in the spring. You go there to come back this year in this situation and play again. And most of the guys that got the extra year, I wouldn't be surprised to see them all opt for the 5th year situation.
Well, that's what we heard from Cordell Ford when we interviewed him back in March.
Yep.
He's an All-American caliber, sort of a rover safety hybrid. Outside linebacker type, but he was basically our team is on a mission. We never should have lost to North Central in that second round game, and we want to come back and win a national championship in our home state, literally a few miles away from campus. And that Hall of Fame stadium, I think we all saw on national television when I believe the Cowboys and the Steelers played a few weeks ago. I mean, grand stage. It's not going to be that full for a Division III Stag Bowl championship game, but if Mount Union's in that final, a lot of people from Ohio are going to show up for that, and it may give it that, the sort of the big game feel that it really deserves from a fan perspective. I mean, obviously it's a big game for the players and the coaches and everybody on the field, but a hometown team in the final will definitely add some intrigue.
Last time a hometownish team was in the Stag Bowl was Mary Hardin Baylor down in Shenandoah, Texas. Obviously not right down the street, but close enough. And they won that, and it does kind of matter if you can get that to happen. And they've got a lot to play for, as Mount Union. Now, we will talk about an omission from our list because we feel the need to when they're number 11 on D3Football.com's list, and they're not to be found in our top 25. Most likely would have been number 26 or 27 if we did the computations out. Worst case, 28, but when you get that low, again, it's a point or two when it's just the two of us making the decisions. And we did discuss this before we saw the D3Football.com poll come out, because that's when we did ours. We wanted to wait for Pat to get his out before we did ours, or before we put ours out. It was already done.
Yep.
And we have not changed it since that point. John Carroll. This is a team that we admit is a good team.
Yeah.
No doubt. They played decent football in the spring, struggled in the second half against Mount Union, maybe did better than Heidelberg did from coast to coast in that game. Yeah. But it just seems like the intangibles give a slight edge right now for me with Heidelberg and knock John Carroll down a little bit further. It's tough for me to believe that John Carroll is the same team that we saw a few years back, and they've had coaching transitions since that point. It's just not. I'm not sold. I'm just not sold right now that they are. Now that can change very quickly. We're going to see some, I think, important games in the first few weeks.
In week 1, they're going to host Washington and Jefferson.
Yeah, exactly.
So, that's a battle in theory of 2 top 25 teams based on the D3Football.com poll. It will make us look good if the Presidents win that game. If they don't or lose badly, it will be a little bit of egg on our face. But I know Coach Karras was at the recent practice. I know Coach Sirianni tweeted out about his former head coach. He's a Mount Union guy. Coming to talk to his team, and this Washington Jefferson team feels like they're kind of on a mission. And I know that a Mount Union guy like Coach Sirianni wants to beat their number one alumni rival John Carroll in a pretty important national game right off the bat.
Yeah, and I think W&J has a bad taste in their mouth after that Westminster loss in the championship. Yeah. So here's a chance for redemption for them. Take nothing away from John Carroll. Overall, they are a very good team in the national landscape, but I don't know what they are right now enough to give them into my top 25 personally, and they weren't on my ballot. I don't know if maybe you had them in the 24 or 25, but it ends up washing out.
Nope.
But the answer is we know they're not there on our list, and there are the reasons for it. It wasn't an omission of some sort, like we forgot they existed. We had the conversation. We'll see where it goes. Like you said, we could be wearing egg on our face after week 1 and be like...
Wouldn't be the first or last time that happened.
Biggest fans of John Carroll ever right here. Yeah. But listen, I will not be seeing them play on week 1, but here's what's going to happen. Let's take everybody through my road trip coming up on Labor Day weekend to see multiple games of football played. I'm going to start, obviously, in upstate New York, which is home base for me right now, and on Friday morning... trek my way down the thruway to New York City, get myself kind of set up in my apartment for a little bit, and then drive out to FDU hosting Merchant Marine on that Friday night game. Should be great and fun to see Coach Toop and Jimmy Robertson in his first head coaching opportunity.
Officially,
Yep, it's been a long wait for him for sure. So we're going to try to do some in-game and post-game coverage of that, possibly live, possibly not. We're still formulating exactly what we're going to do there. But we will obviously do Twitter updates as we can and videos from field level to the degree they let us. Obviously, we have to let them know we're coming and see what the rules are going to be about that.
Yeah.
Then going to drive partway through Pennsylvania, and then in the morning wake up and finish that drive because I want to see our number 1 team, Mount Union, versus, I just got to cheat and look, number 12 team on our list, Westminster, at Westminster. I've not attended a packed game, I believe, since, what was it, Carnegie Mellon hosting Union in 1997, I want to say?
That was a while ago.
Yeah, I'm trying to think the last time I was at a packed venue, at least.
Yeah.
It's been that long.
Actually, this actually pops into my head too, Frank, that, speaking of teams that people might have think we've forgotten. We didn't forget about Case Western, which was the last PAC team to win the PAC title in a regular season, not in the spring season. They are certainly a team that will be in the conversation, in the running. But once again, don't really know what's going on there. I know they're bringing some guys back, but they've been off for an extended period. But there really is no bigger game of the weekend, PAC or otherwise. I mean, these two programs were some of the best. I think in our spring poll, we had Westminster around, number 5? So this is, for at least the most recent football season that we had in the spring, these were two of the best teams in the country. And they've had some continuity. They've been building up to a really, what should be like almost a national championship kind of game.
So after that game, we'll be doing a pregame kickoff show coverage to the degree we have enough broadband out there, and I think we do, or bandwidth. And then in-game again, and some post-game recordings at the very least of interviews that we'll be doing out there. Then I'm going to get in the car and drive north. First time as a New Yorker I will ever get to the city of Buffalo in my life. Believe it or not, folks.
Someone get him some chicken wings.
Or a lot of different food that they're renowned for up there. But Buffalo State is hosting a team that could be a very big voice in the Empire 8 this season, St. John Fisher.
Yeah.
And so I have not gotten to see Buffalo State up close and personal ever, if I remember correctly. And St. John Fisher, it's been a while since I got to see them. So going to get to see that game. We didn't have many choices for night games this Saturday night, but this is a good one.
That were drivable from Western Pennsylvania.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But at the same time, this is a very good one. I'm actually interested to see how this turns out. Empire 8 Liberty League challenge of sorts right there. Mm-hmm. And then I'm going to drive back on Sunday all the way back to upstate New York, Saratoga area. So you can see on the map there what it's looking like.
Round robin there.
You can see how many miles it is. I didn't compute it beforehand, but we'll figure it out for the screen right now. So we'll get you more information about those visits that we're going to do and the coverage we're going to do. It's going to be important for us to get back on the road to let you guys know we are for real in what we do here in the coverage we provide.
Just look for the guys with these shirts.
We missed being out on the road for sure, and we're going to get this guy up here at least, or up there at least once this season, I believe. Stay tuned for that. Okay, that's enough of us at this point. But on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday of next week, we're going to have Region 1, 2, 3, and 4 previews essentially coming up. Actually, we'll call it 4+, because we'll look at 4, 5, and 6 all together at that point. So stay tuned for that. It'll be about 20 minutes to 25 minutes for each of those shows, a lot shorter versions, but we'll give you snippets of what to expect in key games early in the season for each of those regions. JB, last thought?
Well, I just hope that we get to week 1 and that it's a success. I think getting through a full weekend of games without cancellations, without major issues would be nice.
Yep.
Just so, hoping that everything goes well. I know we've been seeing some scrimmages this past weekend between, different programs, and the guys are getting back to school, and hopefully we won't be talking about what we talked about in the first part of the show that much, but it's possible. And so I think, you can maybe expect the unexpected, but let's try to hope for the best, and we'll see what happens. We will do our best to cover, which is realistically the most ambitious swath of teams we've ever attempted, the spring season notwithstanding. And we're excited about it. I think we're up for the challenge, and it should be a really fun football season.
I'm going to get the caffeine ready for the road trip and for the entire season, and maybe some 5-hour energies and some Red Bull. Yeah. And if you're of those companies, feel free to send me some for free. I won't mind it one bit. Also, thank you to everybody that's been sending us different paraphernalia from your schools, shirts, etc.
Yeah.
I mean,
helmets, jerseys.
Keep them coming, don't get me wrong. But our respective families are starting to think we're a little weird, but we still love it.
And what else is new?
We'll be showing you a lot of that throughout the season as we get our sets kind of renovated and changed. This is an hour and 10. We're out of here, folks. We'll see you next Monday for more.